You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan, and joining me as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vive. Squid, how are we doing today?
Like every other day, nothing.
Exactly, watching TV. We got hockey to watch now.
Well, I took an hour walk this morning and then started watching some TV, which I will do afterwards. And that's about all we're doing these days. So, what are you going to do? I mean, it is the rules, and that's just the way it is.
We've got a interesting guest today, another one of your ex-teammates. And this guy probably is more famous for an event that happened on the ice that almost cost him his life without the quick thinking of Sabres trainer, and I'm referring to Clint Malarchuk. So you know all about that when you were there that night.
Yeah, that was pretty, I won't say it was pretty, it was really, really scary. And if not for Jim Pizzatelli, as you mentioned, our medical trainer, who, reacted very, very quickly and wisely, Clint may not be on here with us today. So, it was a very difficult thing to watch, especially one of your teammates and a guy like Clint, who everybody, loved and as a teammate and as a person, but pretty scary night all around.
Well, we're going to hear from him firsthand and hear from his side of the equation where he was experiencing it all. And so we'll get to Clint in a couple of minutes. But first off, hockey's back. As of this recording, the Leafs played last night. And by the time you're listening to this, they'll played on Friday night. So I know there were some issues with Rogers and people watching games and stuff like that last night. But what was your impressions of that opener?
I thought a little bit sloppy. I think both clubs. I mean, obviously with short training camp and no exhibition games and so on, they probably really haven't had a great opportunity to work on all the real things that they need to as hard as they do in a regular game. So I thought it was a little bit sloppy, but hey, 2 points is 2 points, even though unfortunately the other team got one. That is in their division for this year, at least. But you know what? It was hard to kind of follow because there was so many changes in lines throughout the game, like which we anticipated that Thornton wasn't going to play the whole game with Matthews and Marner, and of course they had Hyman up there a few times, and so there was a lot of line juggling going on too. But but hey, they came out with a win, and I think Freddie was okay. He maybe could have been a little bit better, but he's a slow starter anyway. Most years he starts off slow and then he gets into his zone, and he's pretty tough to beat. So hey, 1-0, undefeated.
Listen, there's no marks for neatness, okay? So we'll take the points anywhere we can get them. But I think the one thing that stood out to me was, and I know it's only one game and you want to give a little bit of time, but the Thornton experiment with Matthews and Marner, I just don't think is going to work. These two, he looked like he was hurting them at points throughout the game last night, and strictly because these two are a puck possession group. They really move the puck quickly, and they're always on the go. And they looked like they were looking for him a lot of times to get set, and they couldn't find him, or he couldn't get there. And as you pointed out the other day, they need somebody to dig that puck out, and it's banging and crashing. You could see when Hyman went on there, it all of a sudden stepped it back. They got more comfortable with the way they were playing. And, it's no coincidence that, once the regulars were playing at the end, like the top guys were playing the last part of the third period in the overtime, Montreal couldn't keep up with them. Simmons did a good job as far as doing what he was supposed to do. He looked a little tentative out there himself. Bogosian looked a little bit more like the Buffalo Zach Bogosian.
Yeah. Well, he looked really funny in that number. I don't know why, but I guess because nobody's worn it for quite some time. But
yeah, and the stick looked a little bit thin. No, remember, it's a big piece of lumber that the guy used to carry it before with it. But I guess all around, not bad. It looked like an opening night game, looked like an opening night exhibition game.
Yeah,
We shouldn't complain. We got the 2 points, but you could see that once they started getting in their legs, things started coming together pretty good, like pretty good.
yeah. The one thing I noticed with Hyman, especially being on the third line, playing right side, which he normally always played the left side with, say, Matthews and Marner or Tavares and Nylander, whoever. He looked awkward playing the right side. He almost looked like he felt like he was out of place. He really did. And then, the couple of shifts that they put him
Good
on the
point.
left side, I thought he looked more comfortable.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, because it is different for him with the way he attacks in the zone coming
Yeah,
from the left side as opposed to the right side. So, but I think he's going to be moving up and down that lineup as we saw last night quite a bit for at least for the next half a dozen games till they really get a clear picture of what the new guys can do.
yeah,
Vesey scored a goal last night, but the knock on him has always been his work ethic. And pretty much he got handed a gift goal on a
yeah.
heads up play by Nylander. But other than that, he was pretty much invisible most of the night.
Yeah, I didn't see him doing a whole lot throughout the portion that I watched until my television went off on me. But yeah, I remember watching him in Buffalo, and then all of a sudden he goes elsewhere to the Rangers, I think it was, and played a lot better there than he did in Buffalo. But I wasn't unbelievably impressed by him or anything. I thought he was average at best, and he's going to have to step it up if he's going to stay in the top six.
Well, there's going to be some with the back-to-back coming up, against Ottawa as we're speaking. The second part of that'll be tonight. And I think that we're going to see some of those guys that are sitting in the wings waiting to go. The be ready group.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Engvall, you've got
Adam Brooks,
uh,
Robinson,
I'm thinking more of the Russian.
Barbanov is playing on the fourth line.
No, but the other guy that played last year that cut his wrist, I can't remember, his name won't come to me.
Oh, Mikhaev. Yeah, well,
Mikhaev. So I think in my estimation anyway, I think if you look at Engvall and Mikhaev are probably the two likely ones to come in. I would think up front anyway, if they're going to take anybody out. That's just my thinking. I don't know. I like the way both of them play. They're both big bodies. They both play a physical game, and they can move. They're fast. And so in my estimation, those would be the two likely guys that come in and take the place for someone else. But the problem being, though, is that a guy like Vesey, they take him out of the lineup, they got to put him on waivers before he can go to the taxi squad. So, there's going to be a whole lot of thinking going on about it because, those are the things that have to happen before you can bring anybody off the taxi squad.
Well, he's going to get a look. And Mikhaev actually played pretty good last night. So, he's looking to move up that lineup and maybe get another shot of playing Tavares, who played a good game last night with 3 points. And Nylander looked like he stepped up his game a bit. So you're going to have to be playing at the top level to play with those top four guys on whatever side it is. If Hyman with Marner and Matthews, and on the Tavares side, your game better be at the top of its level if you're going to play with those guys. So there's going to be a lot of guys pushing to be in that spot. That's for sure.
Oh, there's no question. And I think the big thing is your vision and your reading of the game has to be very, very good. And you have to obviously be pretty quick to keep up with those guys. But I mean, you look at how they played the last few years together with what's his name on the left side rather than playing right wing on the third line. I believe the line would be much more effective going back to that combination that had so much success.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're sitting here as people are listening to this, and they've got back-to-back wins and going for the third one tonight after listening to this one, or listening to this just before you watch the Leafs win their third in a row. So we'll see. Now, I guess just before we bring Clint on, we'll go through our little bit of, it's my mistake too. Today I had a couple questions and I put them off to the side here. So we'll get to that next week for people coming in with us. But just this day in Leaf history, as we like to refer people to. Here's one, I think, Squid. You can get the boys on the golf course with this one and maybe win yourself a free hot dog and maybe a Coke or something off this one. But The only night, January 16th, 1934, Ken Doherty scored the only hat trick in NHL overtime history as Toronto defeated Ottawa 7-4. And by the way, they're playing Ottawa tonight as we're speaking. So that's why I picked this one. You got to remember in those days, overtime was a 10-minute mandatory period in those days. Today, it's sudden death.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and a lot of
But
people
not
don't know
during the
that.
regular season, in the playoffs, correct?
That's the play. That was overtime history. Now that was during, I guess that was a playoff game at the time in January.
Yeah. Okay.
And in January 16th, 1968, another little bit of a interesting fact for you. Toronto Maple Leafs beat the NHL All-Stars 4-3 in the final All-Star game that had the defending Stanley Cup champs play the rest of the league's All-Stars. And in that game, a young kid by the name of Bob York picked up his first assist in his first All-Star game. How about that?
Many, many more to come after that, too.
Many, many more to come after all of that. So we have that. So there we have it. So I think there's enough about us there today. So I think what we'll do is we'll turn it over to Clint. Let's hear what he has to say. All right, Squid, our guest today had a pro career that spanned over 16 years, a very good goalie, but he's probably more well-known, and I'm sure he's probably sick and tired of talking about it, or maybe he's not, about a very scary incident. You two were teammates at the time when this happened, when his throat was cut with a skate in Buffalo one evening. He's written a book as a bestseller. He's done a documentary. He's been a public speaker. He's a rancher, and we're looking in the background at a real setup here. I mean, it looks like the set of Dallas we're looking at here, and I'm waiting for JR to walk across the room. But anyway, I'm walking into the show today, Clint Malarchuk. Clint, how are we doing today?
We're doing good. We're doing good. I'm in northern Nevada by Lake Tahoe, and the weather's pretty nice right now. Unseasonably warm, so I'm happy.
And just before we started, Clint showed us where Lake Tahoe is, about a 30-minute drive from you, and there's going to be 2 games there this year.
That's right, but unfortunately, no fans. So, and since they kicked me out of the NHL, I'm not a coach or a player anymore. So I can't.
So you can't get to. So how you spend it? Well, I mean, this is probably a crazy question, but how are you spending your days? I can see in the background we have a pretty good indication of what you do.
Well, I keep pretty busy as a public speaker, but ever since COVID started, that's been shut down. I do have a horse business. I'm an equine certified equine dentist and chiropractor, and I got my own horses, of course, and buy and sell, trade, whatever I can do to make a buck right now. It's times are tough right now, you know.
Yes, as everybody's experiencing that, Clint, it's everywhere. And now Squid and I, this is really probably journalism you haven't really experienced before. This is really hard hitting, and some of the stuff we're going to come at you with. And right off the bat, we love nicknames. And you've got to handle the cowboy goalie. Now, there's been a lot of guys from out west. A lot of guys who've grown up on ranches. Like, how did you get that label?
Well, I did grow up around horses, grew up, just basically cowboying. And that's what I do in the off season. I'd rodeo in the off season, which I got in trouble for doing later on when they found out. But, I just kind of grew up around it. And I have a passion for hockey and horses, really.
Oh, that's pretty good. You're still doing any kind of rodeoing or
I do a bit of roping.
Oh, yeah? Oh.
I don't get on the broncs anymore unless it's unless I'm starting a colt and he bucks a bit. I've got one here. He bucked a bit the other day, but nothing too crazy anymore.
Well, I just watched the series Yellowstone, and it was all about cowboys and roping and riding and everything else. And I got to tell you, it was pretty darn nice. And I just thought, you know what, maybe the day will come where I would love to go and just stay on a ranch for like a week or something and ride horses and do all the things that they did in that movie, because it looked like it was work, but it also looked like it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, if I liked you, Squid, I'd say you got an open invite here.
Yeah, but I can't get across the border. Well, yeah, I could if I flew, I guess, but.
Well, if he liked you, he would, he said.
Well,
I heard him. I just ignored that.
You're welcome here anytime, Squid. Bring Joyce.
Well, now, Clint, just speak to maybe the early days of growing up playing hockey. And again, you mentioned you're on a farm, you grew up around horses, and just talk about the early days of hockey.
Well, the early days, ironically, we kind of moved south. I grew up in Grand Prairie, and then I played most of my minor hockey in Edmonton, and grew up on the same neighborhood as Kelly Rudy. And we grew up together. He didn't start he was just a great athlete, no matter what. Baseball, throw a football like beautiful, spiral, and he picked up hockey. I think he was like 12 years old, never even skated, and he was so athletic. He caught on real quick, and we played every sport together. And Grant Fears from our well, he's outside of Edmonton in Stony Plain area or Spruce Grove. And we had a few goalies come out of that Edmonton area. Pete Peters, going back a bit, and a few others now.
Well, how did you get stuck in goal, or did you want to play goal?
Well, my dad was a goalie, and played without the mask. I got some old black and white pictures and of him playing, and then my older brother, 7 years older, was a goalie too. So it wasn't like I was the fat kid or couldn't skate. They had to stick me in goal. It was, or the love of the equipment. I just wanted to be like big brother and dad.
Fantastic. Now, you ended your minor hockey. How'd you end up in Portland, and speak to the couple of years you played there?
Well, back then, they used to have, now I think they have a draft for the kids going to major junior. And back then it was territorial. And the Edmonton Oil Kings were the team that moved to Portland. And so they still held the Alberta territory. So that's how I got into their system. I played a couple years, tier 2 junior, and then went to Portland for a couple of years. And that was different because I think we were the only American team out of any of the junior teams. Now we've got quite a few in the States. In the Ontario League and in the Western League. I'm not sure if there's any in Quebec or not, but we were like the only U.S. team. So our travel was pretty extensive. I remember one time we went on a 26-day road trip, all by bus, and we started out west and worked our way to, I think it was Brandon or Winnipeg, and then worked our way home.
Wow, Squid.
I'm glad I played in the Quebec League back when I did, because everybody was for. I think Chicoutimi was the only trip we had that was more than 3.5 hours, and we didn't travel that much. It was kind of nice to actually do that. I couldn't even imagine.
You imagine the smell of that bus after 26 days of hockey players, and back then it was all fast food, right?
Yeah.
They found out chicken was good protein for athletes, and so we ate at KFC.
Oh yeah, that bus must have been really pretty smelling by the time you guys got back.
and there was a few fights on the bus too.
Well, 25 days, I would assume there would be. Yes.
Yeah,
you're passing that puck on my skates. How am I supposed to get points? Bang! We probably could just,
it wasn't even about that. It was about some guy passing gas real bad, and they tell him, "Oh, God, thanks. Quit that. Go to the restroom." Big fights.
Well, so now you're in Portland, Clint. Every player kind of goes through this, or maybe you didn't. Was there a moment in time you thought that maybe you could do this for a living? And then maybe speak right into your draft year before Quebec took you.
Well, when I played like junior B, or West, they call it tier 2 junior.
Yeah.
I started to excel. I was like 15 years old playing, and a lot of the guys were overage, 20-year-old and that. So I kind of thought, wow, maybe it was a dream anyways. I don't know if it was a reality at that time, but it was definitely my dream.
Mm-hmm.
My first year in Portland, I didn't have a very good year and missed the draft. I was very, very homesick. It really affected me. We had some issues back home, and I felt like I should maybe be there, but I stuck it out. And the next year, I ended up having a decent year and got drafted by Quebec.
Now, coming from Western Canada, you go to your first training camp coming east. You're Western boy, as I said. It had to be a tough, speak to your adjustment and driving to your first camp and just kind of being a goalie. Remember, there's only a couple of goalies trying out. It's not like you can turn and talk to 30 other forwards or defensemen. How did you get yourself through all that?
Well, my first year was in the American League. I was in Fredericton,
Yeah.
and we didn't have a very good team. We were shorthanded a lot of times. So the next season we split Fredericton with Vancouver. Quebec and Vancouver split
Yeah.
Fredericton as the farm team. But I was seeing 50 shots a game, and you know, we were playing with 14 guys sometimes the first year, and we were calling guys up from the intermediate league in Fredericton. And I mean, yeah, it was kind of a gong show that first year, but I think it really helped me seeing all that rubber. You know, I stopped more rubber than a prostitute that year.
Now, what about now? You played. Now, Jacques Demers was your coach.
Very good point. I don't mean to cut you off, but
No, that's fine.
Doc was very, very personable. He cared about us, not just as hockey players, but our personal life. And I remember getting a Dear John letter from my girlfriend in Portland. And, you know, of course, this is like my first girlfriend, my first Dear John letter. And I was a little bit rattled. And Jacques noticed I was kind of moping around a little bit. And he called me in his office and, you know, hey, kid, what the matter? You don't look like yourself. And later that day, he said, you come to my house for dinner. And his wife made dinner. And, you know, he was just like a father figure as much as a coach. Really, I think it really helped me through my first year pro, especially. And I, you know, I was from out west, and I was all the way in the Maritimes now, long ways from
Well,
home.
lucky you. You got to go to the Maritimes, Clint.
I know. I love the Maritimes. I tell you what, Squid, the Maritime people, they remind me a lot of where I grew up in Grand Prairie. You know, ranchers and farmers, very down to earth, very kind and friendly people. And anytime I go out there, I went to PEI to do a speaking event. I think it's about a year ago, last summer, and it was fantastic. The people just are awesome there.
Yeah,
Now,
I always said
it
that.
sounds like. Oh, sorry, it's good.
So I always said in the Maritimes, if your car broke down and you were kind of in the middle of nowhere, you could walk up to a farm and they'd take you in for the night, feed you in the morning, and they'd have your car fixed and ready to go for it the next morning. And that's just how the people are out there.
Yeah, they are very true. Or you just wait 10 minutes till a car comes by and they'll for sure pick you up or tow you into town or whatever. Yeah, great people.
Now, just I want to carry a little bit further with Jacques Demers. Now, you mentioned the fact that he was good for you emotionally, as you know, as a kid coming from out west. Now, professionally, was that just enough to give? Like, did he just let you develop on your own? Seeing you had the talent, obviously, you're taking 50 shots a night.
Yeah.
Did he just figure they'd leave you alone and just looked after you to make sure you weren't distracted other ways, and that sort of carried you through to make it to the NHL?
Yeah, you know, I think so. He pretty much left me alone that way. We did have a goalie coach that came down from Quebec, and goalie coaches were not really around back then. And I remember I thought, oh, I get a goalie coach. And I don't even think he was this big fat guy, French Canadian guy. And he says, okay, kid, we go for beers. And so we'd sit in the pub and drink beer all afternoon and talk hockey. So, you know, it was, but yeah, I didn't have a goalie coach really until Buffalo. And, you know, that was some years later. You know, so he kind of let me play and just work hard. I played a lot of games. I saw a lot of pucks. And, you know, I think I was rookie of the year. I was rookie of the year on the team anyways. And like I said, we didn't have a very good team and we were shorthanded. So it wasn't like I had a lot of competition, but just seeing that amount of pucks every night.
What were some of the stranger things now you're coming again from Western Canada, your first year playing pro, so you're thrown right into the fire. So there's no time to sit back and take it all in. But as you look back, what were can you reflect on some of the stranger, some of maybe the funny things you saw in the minors, and maybe you just weren't expecting this, like going to play pro hockey?
Yeah, for sure. Because, you know, we're pros and supposed to conduct ourselves as pros. And we were on a road trip down in Springfield, Massachusetts area. And we were supposed to, we overnighted in Boston for whatever reason, and a huge snowstorm hit. And a bunch of the boys, we went out anyways, and we're in this bar, and their taxis aren't running. I mean, there must have been 2 feet of snow. but there was a snowplow across the street at 2 in the morning when the bar closed, and the guy was in Dunkin' Donuts and his truck was idling. So one of our guys goes in and says, "Come on, boys," and he starts grinding the gears, and we're piling in this truck, and just very unprofessional, I guess, but we're still pretty young. We're 20 years old, and kind of crazy. And I remember we had a party up at the hotel that night, and one of the guys he was in the hallway, and he comes in the room, and he's got the fire hose. Like, they open up the window on the hallway, and he's bringing in a fire hose, and he's trying to turn the sucker on. We had some fun. We had some good times.
Well, we could do that back then and get away with it without anybody finding out, right, for the most part, because of no social media and that sort of thing. And there was a lot of crazy things even in the National League that we did, and nobody ever found out because, like I said, there's no social media. You try and do that today, and you're in trouble right away.
Yeah. And it was harmless fun for the most part back then. I mean, it's stupid stuff, that we did, but we weren't hurting anybody. But the thing is, the cell phones now, there'd be a picture with a guy with a fire hose in a hotel, and obviously that would, the social media would blow up over that. But yeah, we definitely, back in our day, Squid, we had fun. I mean, the game is such a business now, and I understand that there's a lot of money up, but we played for, not that they don't nowadays, but we played for the love of the game, because we didn't get paid very much.
Well, we got paid decently, and I think that was good enough for us, and we were happy. But we loved doing what we were doing, and I think more than anything, we loved just being around each other, and, like you say, doing those crazy things. Harmless but crazy things that, well, people today would think they're crazy. Back then, most people didn't think we were that crazy, but we were.
My first contract, I was making, I think it was $18,000 in the American League, and if I got called up on my NHL ticket was like 80. And that I guess it's all relevant, but it's still, compared to now, I say, give me one season as a backup, at $1 million, just 1 year.
Well, I went through a similar thing. I mean, I was picked 5th overall and signed a 4-year deal at 60, 65, 70. And now I got a signing bonus.
What about with the Baby Bulls?
That one was, I was 19, so I was underage because it was a 20-year-old draft. And I think I got 20 for signing and 30 salary. So it wasn't like I was getting rich. In fact, I think my junior team in Sherbrooke, I believe, offered me more than under the table than what I would have made in Birmingham. And
now, Squid, name some of those guys that you played with there in Birmingham. You wouldn't believe these names, listeners that might not know.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. We had Dave Hansen was on with us one time, and of course most of the crazy guys were gone by then. Rick Aduno, Davey Gorman, and then of course we had the Baby Bulls, Goulet,
right.
Ramage,
Hartford, Riggin. You got Gaston Gingras.
No, Gardner was in Cincinnati, I think.
Yeah, he played in Cincinnati. And then, but Dave Hansen was really the year before they had Bilodeau and Beaton and
Steve
Durbano and all those guys. And then they got rid of them all except for Hansen. And then everybody loaded up on tough guys. And that wasn't a very good year for us as far as not coming out with any cuts and bruises most nights. But you know what? Hey, you're playing professional hockey, so put a Band-Aid on it.
That's about the same time the show, The Gong Show, came out. And it was probably inspired by that league.
Oh, something just along the minor, just before we step into where we got to the NHL, just something, Clint, you can touch on. And you touched on the 26-hour trip playing junior hockey. What's something for the listeners they may not understand or that you experienced in the minors that really how difficult it is? Like maybe the level of play is much better than people give it credit for. The travel is really grueling. And as you mentioned, when you're playing the game for the love of the game, but again, the competition to play at that level is probably way more than people really expect.
It wasn't a big adjustment travel wise and things in the American League, because it was a, obviously a great talent level, but the difference between the American League and the NHL as far as, travel, accommodations, practice, things like that. I mean, you're on the road a lot, and it's mostly by bus, at least back then it was. And sometimes we'd fly into a hub, like we'd bus somewhere to catch a flight to Boston, and then from there we'd bus to Springfield and all the, the American League teams that were down there. There was quite a few. I do remember our first road trip. I think it was a 6-hour trip to Halifax, and we were playing home and home game series. So we played at home, and then we traveled to Halifax. It was like 6 hours or something. Guys were going, "What the heck?" And the guys out west are going, "This is a piece of cake." I do remember that was that first year where we had a really bad team, and we got beat 10-2 at home. And I remember Jacques Demers, he had the French accent, and he didn't have a great grasp on some of the lingo. And he goes, "Okay, boy, tonight 10-2, tomorrow the joke on us." And he totally that one up. And we're so bad, we're going, "Yeah, Jacques, it probably will be."
Now you then make the transfer to the Quebec Nordiques. You make it. You're started for a couple of years, but here's one incident, and I'm sure you're going to get a chuckle out of this. In 1984, in the playoffs, you're credited with outplaying in the game. You're given 15 minutes and penalties. You want to tell the listeners that little story?
Western League. I'm from the Western League. Come on. I didn't even play that game. But, my first year, actually, I was fortunate to get drafted by Quebec because they didn't have a lot of depth in goal. So I kind of almost became the third goalie my first year. And my first NHL game, I get called up, and we're playing in Buffalo. And I remember Jacques Richard, who, 50 goal scorer, he hammers one in warm up, hits me in the head. I'm getting stitches. I missed half a warm up. This is my first NHL game. And I remember Michel Bergeron coming in and say, he sees me laying on the table getting stitches. He goes, "Kid, play." And I said, "No, I'm playing. I'll be fine." Because I'm not going through a day of nerves like that again. And I remember back then they had ties, and we tied the game. I got second star. So the next night we're playing on the island, and they were the defending champions. I mean, Bossy, Trottier, Billy Smith. And so I get my second start, and we lose that game 10-7. And yeah, I let in all 10. And I thought, well, Billy Smith let in 7, So the next day, I'm back in Fredericton.
Well, but that night in against Montreal, I mean, of course, it's the arch rival. You're on the bench. Those are the days now. A lot of our younger listeners will not know about the brawls used to take place. Maybe just walk us through that one. Now, did you fight in the Western League at times?
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. I liked fighting. I mean, for a goalie, I enjoyed it. But of course, as a goalie, you're not supposed to. Anyways, they call that Good Friday Massacre. It was on Good Friday.
Remember it?
We're in Montreal, and it was near the end of the second period. The horn sounds and a fight breaks out, and then another fight, and another fight. Then the bench is clear, and everybody's paired up and fighting, and so we get it all sorted out. We go in the locker room. We come out for the third period, and we're just skating around. Back then you could skate around for a couple minutes and then go to the bench, and we're skating around. Well, the brawl broke out before the puck was dropped. And I that's when I got kicked out for fighting. And I remember I was kicked out. Peter Stastny was kicked out. Dale Hunter was kicked out. We had 5 or 6 guys in the locker room, for a playoff game, not able to even go out and watch the third period.
Louis Slager, I think, was involved in that. A big part of that big brawl, was he not?
He KO'd Jean Hamel. The linesman was kind of trying to break him up. And Louis, he's from northern Quebec, and a real stout. Guys used to make fun of him. His French was different. It was real slangish, I guess.
Yeah.
And they used to make fun of him because the French guys couldn't understand his French. But Louis comes over with a big, I think it was a right hand. over top of the linesman and KO John Hamel, ended John Hamel's career. I think he broke his orbital bone, and yeah, he was sleeping on the ice for quite a few minutes.
Now, every player we speak to, Clint, we talked about how emotionally tough it is, that first trade. You get drafted by a team, you get brought, it's your first team, you think you're going to be there for life. We had Curtis Joseph on last week, and he was talking about the same thing and how bad it is. But you're a part of a pretty big trade that eventually landed the Norwich Joe Sakic. By the way, if the Leafs had been listening to their scouts, he would have ended up in Toronto, by the way, but they listened to John Brophy instead. But how did that whole day come down for you, and what were your emotions like going through all of that?
Well, I was it was in the summertime. It was at the draft, day. And I was driving to a rodeo, and I got to the rodeo grounds, and one of the cowboys says, "Hey, you got traded." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "I heard it on the radio. You got traded." And then my mom called the rodeo office there and said, left a message to call home that David Poyle wanted me to call him. And so I'd been traded with Dale Hunter to Washington. And it was it was weird because it was my first time, and I thought, "Whoa, okay." The good part was I was traded with Dale Hunter. We were real close. We were roommates, cellmates. We did everything together.
I would imagine you might have been cellmates a couple of nights.
Yeah. Well, they always say, who do you call when you're in jail? Your best friend. No, your best friend should be there with you. So that's how Dell and I rolled.
Well, unless you're Wayne Cashman, when he was in Boston, the famous story about him when Esposito got a call from a cop and said, "They better come down here and get your man." And he said, he went down and he's standing and goes, "Well, why you called me? Why didn't he call me?" He said, "Because he took the phone call and ordered Chinese food."
Yeah, that's a true story.
So, no.
Sounds like something a goalie would do, not a forward.
Well, back then, I think everybody had that goalie mentality.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, on the surface, things seem to work out a little bit for you in Washington. Maybe the first year, you had a good year the first year. The second year, maybe not quite as good, the whole team overall.
Fuck you.
And then March 16th, you get moved to Buffalo. What about that?
Yeah, that was weird because it was during the season and it was before practice, and Brian Murray, our coach, at the practice rink, he called me in the office, and this is kind of cool because I was, Squid knows me. I'm a team guy. I'm kind of popular. I'm funny. I joke around, and I think I'm pretty well liked as a teammate. And Brian Murray was all choked up. I mean, he was holding back tears, telling me I was traded. And I go, "Brian, you weren't traded. I was traded. I should be upset." But he is another good guy that cared about he was hard. He was tough as a coach. But he was a good person, and he cared about his players, his people too. But yeah, I remember going home and packing a bag. I had my equipment from the rink and jumped in my pickup truck and drove up to Buffalo all in that same day. And I'm thinking, well, how do I pay my bills? My mortgage, we didn't have the internet or, do things online back then. I just remember driving down the road going, I locked my house up. Now what, Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because, I don't think people realize, what went on back in those days when you did get traded like that. Like you had to be on a flight right away to get to another city or drive or whatever the case might be. In my case, a couple of times my wife had to stay home, sell the house. My second one to Chicago, our third one to Buffalo rather. I had a 2-year-old and she was pregnant with one, and she had to stay in Chicago, and I didn't see them for 2 months. But today it's a lot different. You get as much time as you need to get to the next city. They have people that take care of your wife, bring them in, show them where everybody lives, and then they have somebody that helps you sell your house. It's so much easier, I think, today. Well, it's not easy ever getting traded, but a little easier to make the move than it was back then.
Well, teams would actually now, assign, I don't know, a staff member from the front office or something to help that player. Like you said, find a place to live, get a realtor, get the family in, take care of all those things.
So 16 days after the trade, one of the most horrifying incidents in NHL history takes place. You're on the receiving end of it. Both of you were a part of that, one on the bench and one on the ice. You both can go through this, but without the quick thinking of Sabre trainer Jim Pizzarelli, we may not be speaking to you today. Clint, just what do you remember about the incident and how it all took place? And Rick, then you can chip in watching the whole thing unfold on the bench.
Well, that's my claim to fame. I wasn't a very good goalie and didn't have any records. Well, I got one of the records as one of the worst sports injuries ever, so I got that going for me.
Well, the neck guard.
Well, I was wearing a neck guard, but it was a play. You see it a million times. A pass from the corner comes across the top of the crease. A guy going hard to the net, and defensemen back then they'd hook you or hold you up. And Steve Tuttle of St. Louis, Huey Krupp was holding him up, and Steve's feet flipped forward, and I was coming across on my knees, and his skate just came up and clipped my neck. And I remember, I didn't know what happened really, but I remember I took my mask off for whatever reason, and the blood just flew. The first couple of pumps were about 6 feet, and then it just kind of poured out of me as my heart rate decreased. And I thought I was done. I thought I was done like dinner. And I remember I was new to Buffalo. As you said, I'd just been traded there, and I was playing the best hockey of my life. Yeah. My first game with Buffalo, I got a shutout in New York. And so that changed my life for sure, that incident. I prepared for death. I didn't know too many guys on the team. And I remember the trainers in the training room. I ripped Simonik. I said, Rip, hold my hand. Get somebody call my mom, tell her I love her. And a lot of people say, how did you get up and skate off the ice? Well, the truth of the matter is I wasn't being a hero. I didn't want my mom to see me die on TV. And so long story short, I was prepared for death, which is basically a trauma. And that trauma really changed my life. Not immediately, because I came back real quick in 10 days. I figured that was the right thing to do. I mean, doctors were saying, no, take the season off. You might want to retire. And I remember no counseling. Jim Pizzatelli, our medical guy, the counseling for me was him and I went and stood in front of the goal in our street clothes. And we kind of looked around. He goes, this is it. This is where it happened. I go, yep. And we bumped. All right, away we go. That was my counseling. And I got through I became kind of a hero in Buffalo because I came back. I really think I epitomized what Buffalo, upstate New York, blue collar sports fans loving an athlete, hardworking, gritty, no talent, and I came back quick. So I had so much love and support to get me through the rest of that season. It was the next season where I started to have nightmares, flashbacks. I didn't sleep for 10 days. I'd sleep in a chair. Kind of like a hard chair, because I didn't want to go into a REM sleep, because as soon as I did, I'd see the skate come up. And I wasn't telling anybody what was going on. I'm trying to be a tough cowboy and push through this. And I remember 10 days, no sleep. We had a Super Bowl party at Pat LaFontaine's house. And I remember going, and I haven't slept and I'm not doing good. I didn't stay there but 20, 30 minutes, had one beer and left. And I remember going home and I was playing with a broken thumb or a fractured thumb, and I had some painkillers. And I remember reading the bottle, do not drink with alcohol, will make you drowsy. I was like, damn straight. So I took a few extra painkillers thinking it'll help me sleep, but I drained a bottle of scotch too, because it said don't drink with alcohol. So as a dumb goalie, I do the opposite. And my heart stopped. And so they rushed me to the hospital. I got obviously lived through that, but I remember waking up in the hospital and the psychiatrist, they called for thinking it might have been a suicide attempt. And I said, no, I just can't sleep. I got this OCD. I can't leave the house. I get panic attacks. And so that was the first time I ever got diagnosed with my long history of mental illness, which I had as a kid. I know I did. Anxiety issues and OCD for sure, but all undiagnosed. And so now I got a diagnosis, and that was beginning of a 2-year journey of different doctors, different medications. Nothing was working. And my play was really getting, worse than normal. And so I get sent to the minors, and in the minors, I remember my first game, I let in 4 goals on 6 shots and got pulled after the first period. I mean, 4 goals on 6 shots in the minors, even for me, isn't good. I know that. And I remember sitting on the bench the rest of the game with a towel over my head, just sobbing. And I went into our coach, Rick Dudley, at the end of the game. And I said, I can't do this, Rick. I can't perform. I got to retire. And Rick, being Rick, and Squid knows Rick, and he's quite a wonderful man. And he got me into the specialist, and the specialist got me fixed up right away. 6 weeks it took, and on the right medication. And I did really well for about, 13, 14 years on that medication. And, that was, I returned and played in the minors. I played in Las Vegas in the IHL. And you know what, Boston Brew, I was playing so well, Boston offered me a contract. And because of what I'd been through, I didn't really want to go back to the NHL because of fear of the pressure. I'd been, pressure is obviously a big, if you got, it affects us all for sure. But if you got mental illness, it can, like obsessive compulsive disorder, before a game, my OCD would be a lot worse than normal because of pressure. So I didn't want to go back there, and I stayed in. I stayed in Vegas. They ended up signing me to a pretty good contract, and I negotiated horses into the contract, and it was funny because the reporter asked me why. Yeah, well, the reporter asked me, said, "This must be the first professional contract with livestock involved. Why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, I'm going through a nasty divorce, and if she wants half a horse, I know which end she's getting." Well, he wrote that, and I guess my ex-wife, or at the time going through the divorce with, wasn't too happy with that comment. I thought it was funny.
I wouldn't think she would be, but I mean, I recall that night, and I got to tell you, I mean, I know he wasn't there very long with us before the incident, but Clint had veered himself through his teammates instantly as soon as he got through us. The worst part about that game after that incident was the game was like it was like a game of shitty. Nobody went near anybody. Nobody wanted to hit anybody. I mean, that's what it was. And everybody was pretty scared. In fact, I think there was an older gentleman had a heart attack, I think, in the stands that night after that happened. But the worst part about that whole thing was after the game, sitting in the room, not knowing, because I mean, we, obviously had similar thoughts to what Clint did, that, I mean, he may not make it. And the worst part was sitting in the room for about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes afterwards, not knowing what the hell was going on. And it was like, finally we got word that, he's going to be okay. And then we all left. But we stayed there until we found out, because that was the most painful part of the whole thing. Well, other than watching it, was sitting there wondering what the hell was going on. And it was very, very difficult. And I mean, I'm sure not quite as difficult as Clint, but for us, it was emotional. It was a very, very tough thing to get through, because we had to wait. We had no knowledge. That was the scary part.
Yeah, I was in surgery.
Yeah, we didn't know. Nobody told us. And you got 20 some odd guys and the training staff sitting in the room, and the coaches in their office, and they'd be walking in and out, and there was nobody to give us any answers. And that was, not knowing what was happening was driving us crazy in that room. I think we might have had beer sent in, so that might have helped us a little bit, but nonetheless, it still was a very, very, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just an hour and a half of anxiousness. I mean, I already had anxiety problems, and I didn't, but that just was compounded it, and all you could think of was like, what the hell's going on? Like, but we didn't have any information.
Well, you like to think back and think, I mean, we always like to reflect back and look at things, 2020, besides being at 12:01, this year, 2020 vision, we had that. But you going back and playing after 10 games with the hockey player mentality, one could sit back and say, I mean, obviously that's what hockey players are almost expected to do. But in your case, maybe my immediate thought would have been, well, if you'd sat out the rest of the year, you'd sat out longer time and maybe really reflected harder, would that have changed things? But, the OCD that you knew you were suffering as a child, this must have just weighed on you. You've just touched on just absolutely after devastating injury, just probably magnified everything for you even more so.
Well,
and I think, yeah, go ahead. I got another question for you when you answer this.
What I've learned is that's what trauma will do. If you're predisposed, which I was, to mental illness, a big traumatic event like that will magnify it, and it just explodes. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Squid and I have this conversation with players a lot, and because this is something that listeners are learning, I think, hopefully listening to a lot of the podcasts with guys like yourself, giving up your time and speaking to people, because hockey players have never really done this before, and hearing about the other side of it. Because whether you're a mailroom attendant, a lawyer, accountant, or a player playing professional sports of some sort, when you leave the office, or in both your cases, leave the hockey rink, there's a whole other life that's no different than the working guy that include anything from changing a diaper, a tire, taking out the garbage, drinking problems, drug problems, or some sort of mental anguish. And I think, more and more that's being spoken about, people are starting to realize that and have a whole different look on it.
Well, as far as my OCD goes, I struggled with it for sure. But I credit it too, because it gave me a work ethic. I repetition, working out. And I saw Squid a year ago this month, the January, at a reunion weekend in Buffalo. And we're walking down the street, and Squid says, Clint, I read your book, and I never knew all this stuff, and especially the OCD. He says, the only thing kind of different about you, he said, you're a very normal goalie. The only thing was kind of weird is you'd be in the weight room for 4 or 5 hours after practice, and that was the OCD. But we're good actors, like we really can hide it when we need to. And, we're, like I said, we're good actors. I was like Bradley Cooper, except better looking.
When I look back on that too, I mean, myself, not knowing that I had anxiety problems, and they never diagnosed me with those problems. And of course, what did I do to kind of help me get through that was alcohol, and a lot of it at some times. And then eventually I quit when I was 35, after my first year of coaching. And then the anxiety came back like harder than it was before. And then I got properly diagnosed, and like yourself, they tried a whole bunch of different medications till I found the one that worked. And then, I kind of could go out and lead a normal life, wasn't anxious both behind the bench or before the game or going to speak in front of a crowd. I mean, yeah, there's always nerves with those things, but nothing like it was for a little bit when I quit drinking. But in your situation, and I've told many people this, I remember we were playing Boston in the playoffs, and we won. Who was Darren Pupa was our goalie who broke his arm. Then they made the trade for you because we needed another number one goalie. So you come in and you're playing real well. And Jacques Cloutier, who didn't play much there in Buffalo, was our backup. And we get into the playoffs in Boston. We win the first game in Boston, 3-0. And Ted Sater was our coach, I believe, at the time. And then we were playing back to back. And I think the mistake he made, and there's no offense to you, Clint, in any way, shape, or form, was not starting Jacques the next night. He didn't feel Jacques had played 2 nights in a row. But we had a 3-0 lead in that game too, and then we ended up losing it, and then the next 2 at home, and lost the series. And anyway, I don't know. I mean, it seemed to me that all of a sudden their game plan was to get as close to you as possible and try to get you off your game. Coming off that injury, obviously, that might have had some effect on what transpired the rest of that game, I would think.
Well, I do remember that very well. And, You know what affected me more than anything was I was very weak from the loss of blood. It was in the middle of summer before I really felt like I regained my strength. And I remember my knees were knocking in that game and just fatigue. And I remember in warm-ups, that brutal Boston crowd, I'm skating around and they're up at the glass going like this, slashing oh man, that's no class. I almost died. But I do want to touch on that, Squid, about there's a huge correlation between mental illness, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever it might be, and self-medicating. So addiction, because it works. I mean, before my suicide attempt, I was drinking 25, 30 beers a day just to get through a day because I was just a mess. Of course, that's a lot of beer, but it was American beer and I'm Canadian, so it's not as bad. But that self-medicating, and people should understand that a lot of addiction, you see a person that drinks a lot, maybe ask why are they drinking? Yeah, they're probably addicted to it, the substance physically now, but why did they need to drink like that? And it's usually a correlation with some anxiety or depression or OCD, whatever it might be.
And the
Panic
thing,
attacks.
one of the great things about yourself now is that you go out speak publicly about that. And of course, you have the Bell Let's Talk thing going on in Canada, which I think is really, really, I think, we're at a stage now where probably 80% of the people that do suffer from any kind of mental illness are not afraid to talk about it. But there's still probably that 20% that feel if they do, they're going to be labeled as weak or not effective or, and that sort of thing. And those things have to change. I mean, to see what you went through all those years and so on. And I mean, the knowledge that they have today, I don't know why people don't speak up more.
Well, Michael Landsberg, who suffers with depression, severe depression. I know Michael, and I've spoke with him before at events, and he coined the phrase "sick, not weak," and I think that's a great phrase because people perceive mental illness as a weakness, and it's not. I mean, example: who's the toughest, strongest mentally people in the world, men and women, is our military. And they go to war and they come back with PTSD and they self-medicate and die by suicide. So they're mentally tough. Athletes are mentally tough. And there's more and more athletes coming out with, Robin Leonard, for example, with his struggles and with addiction. He had both going, he's like me. And, I think that's important that people understand that it's not a weakness, it's a sickness, and it can be cured. And that first step is getting help, admitting, to somebody, hey, I'm struggling here. When I wrote my book, I put my email in the back of the book, and I could not believe how many people emailed me or Facebooked me and just said, oh my God, that is my story. That is my demons. Or, I went, holy smokes, there's a lot of Clint Malarchuks out there. I had no idea.
Well, I was going to say to both of you guys, first off, Deb and I, my wife and I, we helped Michael host an event for Sick Not Weakness when he first launched a few years ago with Mike Babcock at our place. And so we were, and I know that's telling Rick before he came on the air that when he came over to initially, and we've known Mike a number of years, to come over and discuss how we were going to lay it out, it took him 2 weeks to get the courage to come to our house. And there's just me and Debbie going to be there, nobody else in the house, but he couldn't get himself out. So along those lines, and you guys have both touched on it, of decades of mental illness being and issues being ignored, and they were viewed upon as weakness and not a sickness. It's now very much a part of our everyday lives, and thank goodness it is being addressed. But what I'd like you two both to comment on is that everybody says it can't be me or it could be me or somebody I know, but this now has got far-reaching aspects right across the universe. Both of you two guys, even in the world of professional sports, would people be shocked or would they be amazed at how many people actually, even in the world of sports, in our case, hockey, actually have this issue?
You'd be amazed. You'd be amazed at how many, I'll step out and say that when my book came out, I had more than several current players reach out to me saying, oh my God, thank you for writing that. I thought I was the only one. And that the doctor people got to understand too that when the psychiatrist that really helped me, he explained it. No one had really explained it to me like he did. He goes, you got a chemical imbalance of the brain. I'm like, no shit, I'm a goalie. And he goes, you don't produce enough serotonin in your brain. He goes, it's no different than a diabetic not producing enough insulin.
Insulin.
Right. And he says, chemicals, different organs. That's all. It's no different than be a diabetic, but there's no shame in be a diabetic.
No, exactly. And I think you're right, Clint. I think we'd be shocked if we, or people would be shocked if they realized how many, let's just say NHL players, are suffering from some kind of mental illness and are getting treated for it. And in fact, Colin Wilson, I was telling Mike earlier, just retired because of OCD problems, got into taking something to get through the day, and then something he called even stronger to go to bed at night. And then he started drinking more. And then he retired after 10 years. And he was like the 7th overall pick by Nashville. He played with my son at the US program. That's how I know him. Kerry Wilson, his father, played in Calgary. And so he just retired because of that. So, hey, you got 700 or 800 players in the league. If you went to a company that had that many employees, I would say probably the rate is probably 20% of the people suffer from some kind of mental illness would be my guess.
Yeah, I'd agree. It might even be higher.
Yeah.
It's not always mental. It's not always mental illness. A lot of times it's emotional distress. What people are going through, like with COVID now, people are out of work. People are getting laid off. People are losing businesses, and they might not be mentally ill, but they're going through emotional distress. Probably a lot of anxiety, probably a lot of depression, and they've never experienced it before in their life. So, there's a lot of people right now in today's world that are struggling for sure.
Well, one of the ways to identify a problem and get the solution is to identify it and to speak about it. And with guys like yourself and Ricky and some other players that are out there talking with us on a regular basis, the Michael Landsbergs of the world and Babcocks, this is a good start. Hopefully progress will be made, and you want to keep up the good work, and want to get at the end of it, Clint, when we finish, we just got a few minutes left here, and we'll wrap up with you. Well, thank you very much so much for your time and giving us today. An email, maybe if somebody would like to reach out to you and maybe look for somewhere they can go for some help, we could get that off you before we close out. But on maybe a lighter note, getting back to the hockey side of it, just as our distraction, let's get to the fun side of things now. Maybe who is one of the funnier teammates you ever played with?
Dale Hunter was, he wasn't like a real witty guy, but he was a prankster. Oh, he was ruthless. And usually dragged me into, some of his pranks. Hey, let's do this and let's do that. And
well, give us an example. He got all afraid when he stole his truck and he had the kid in tears.
Well, we were, totally unrelated. We had a guy I was coaching in Atlanta, and the training camp, the guys are all coming in and staying at this hotel. And this guy, young guy, he's got all his bags, all his belongings in a Suburban or Yukon or something. And he pulls up and gives the keys to the supposed valet. Well, there was no valet at that hotel. Anyways, probably one of the craziest things Dale Hunter and I did. We were with Quebec, and the team president, Marcel Aubout, and Dale and I we were rink rats. We'd be there a long time after everybody left. And Marcel Aubout, he's a big, heavy set guy, and he goes in to have a sauna. And so Dale and I, went to the shower and filled up a bucket of real cold water, opened the door and just fired it in there, and we were gone. This is the president of the Quebec Nordiques. He's the guy responsible for getting the Stastnys over from defecting from Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, Rick, what about your day? You must have had a couple.
Oh, there was lots of guys. The guys I liked the most, and Clint was kind of like this too, is that they didn't say a whole lot. At times, there was times where they just sit and they just take everything in, and then bang, they just come out with something, and it would be the funniest goddamn thing you ever heard in your life. Those are the guys that I loved, was the quiet guys that just came out with those quick-witted one-liners that would crack the whole room up. And it was like, and Clint was very much like that as well.
Well, you mentioned Darren Pupa, and I don't know. I was playing with Buffalo. Darren Pupa was back from his wonky arm, and um, he Poops is a very quiet, unassuming, doesn't laugh, doesn't smile a lot, like. And his fiance told my girlfriend at the time, Darren thinks Clint's the funniest guy, and I ended up emceeing his wedding. And I would never ever thought that. I didn't even know Poops liked me because he never had a reaction. Yet he thought I was the funniest guy in the world.
Now, on another note, one we like to get goalies on is, who was there a player or players? Maybe just we'll use one. We'll be nice to you guys. One guy who just seemed to have your number every time you came down, and he just thought, for the life of you can't stop this bloody guy.
Well, Mike Bossy, he was potent, and he'd chew me up pretty good. But Wayne Gretzky was not a very good hockey player.
No.
And he got so much confidence playing against me, he became great.
Okay, now what about on the other side? Anybody ever come to say, God, I can never beat you? Like, I just can never put one by you. Like, whose number did you have?
I've never had that experience.
He's being modest, isn't he, Squid? He's being modest.
Probably very modest. I would imagine there was a few guys.
When I played in Quebec, I used to have good luck against Buffalo, just the team. I'd have good games against them.
That's why they traded for you.
Probably.
Yeah.
They didn't see my other games, obviously.
Well, it's funny because
I just got a couple minutes left here.
I said that one time recently that one guy I had the most problem with was the guy you mentioned earlier, was Grant Fuhr. And it took me a while to figure out what the hell it was. And then finally one day I'm watching a film and I go, well, he catches with his right hand, and that's where I usually score. I go, like, what a dummy. Like, I didn't figure that out sooner. Like, it's just, it wasn't something that, because I used to visualize quite a bit, but I didn't have that visualization going that he caught with his right hand. And then finally after that, I had a little bit of success on him because I knew that I wasn't going far side, because that was where his strongest point was his glove side.
And that's where you say that's where you scored most of your goals. And I call bull. You scored most of your goals with the puck hitting you in the ass and going in.
A lot of them were like that while I was getting cross-checked in the back of the neck or something.
That would be Dave.
They still count.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They still count. Well, listen, we just want to listen, Clint. We can't thank you enough for coming on, being so candid and frank about your situation and what you're doing. And I'd love to have you back on again at some point. Go through and just keep up with you and how you're doing. Maybe we'll get it. Well, maybe we'll get you back when the Tahoe games get close again at the end of the year. But anyway, thanks very much. And for the listeners out there, if you want to hear about anything, maybe get Clint's book, have a look at that. You can DM us, and if anybody really looking for help, we can get you directed that way. So send that to Rick or I. Clint, thanks very much for joining us. Anything, Dad, before we go, Squid?
You know what? I just, like I say, I had the pleasure of playing with Clint. After reading the book, gave me a lot more admiration for the man, because I didn't realize what he was going through from an early age all the way through. And it gave me a little bit more courage, I think, thinking back to reading his book when I was doing my book, and to not be afraid of telling people what my life was like and what was going on inside my life, as opposed to the outside stuff that they knew about. And so it gave me more courage going forward with all of that kind of stuff. And, because we're human beings. Just because we play in the NHL, like I've said many times, there's hurdles and there's challenges that we're going to face as well.
That's right. Clint, any final word?
Yeah, Squid, come see me. Come see me. You saw the mountains I showed you earlier, and I'm close to Lake Tahoe, so you can certainly ride a horse here at my place.
How far from Vegas?
Oh, 6.5 hour drive. We're pretty far.
I'll stay on the ranch then.
All righty, guys. Well, listen, Clint, thanks very much again. And listen, good luck with everything going forward, and we'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
Well, Squid, that's one of the more, I don't want to say emotional, but one of the more, candid conversations we had about issues that are facing everyday people and NHL players, no matter who they are, on a daily basis. And we've all crossed paths with somebody in our lives, and we are more so these days. And Clint's a wonderful speaker, and I'm telling you, that's the first time I've met him. And as you said, you've told me about him and what a funny guy he is. But boy, he's a terrific speaker, and he should be out doing more of this for sure.
Yeah, Clint's a great person. He really is. And the things that he had to go through. I mean, I encourage anybody who doesn't know Clint Malarchuk at all to buy his book. And I can't remember the name of it.
The Game Changer.
Is that what it is? Anyway,
Game Changer, yeah.
It's an amazing book. And for anybody that perhaps suffers from mental illness of any OCD or whatever it might be, to read what he went through from the time he was a young boy all the way up until like the time he tried to commit suicide. And I mean, he still has a bullet lodged in his brain that they can't take out because it would be too risky. So he's a very lucky man. And I encourage anybody to, as far as buying our books as well, buy Clint's book, because it's very, very, it reveals some really, really dark stuff that he went through during his playing career and post-playing career. And it was a great read, but he's a good friend of mine. I loved Clint from the time I met him, and he's a great guy, and thankfully that he's going out and he's speaking to people about the things that he had to go through, because it's going to help a lot of people.
By the way, it's called The Crazy Game. Sorry, not the, I was thinking of another book. It's called The Crazy Game. In the US, it's called A Matter of Inches, How I Survived in the Crease and Beyond, the US version. So there's two versions to the book, and we highly encourage it. There's a documentary he's done also, and they do speaking engagements. So when he does get out to speak, he's definitely worth a listen. And we'll certainly get Clint back at some point again to see how he's doing and keep up with him. But I love the fact that he makes no mistakes or makes no bones about what he did and how he's tried to self-medicate himself. He takes no excuses, doesn't blame anybody else, but he looks himself straight in the eye and takes it all himself. And I think that's the part about him that people admire when you listen to this man or read his book.
Yeah, he doesn't apologize for anything. He doesn't look at anybody else for what caused, like this caused it, he did this or that. He takes it on head on, and he fought through it head on. And today he's doing very, very well.
Well, we've come to that point in time again where it's another one of the shows in the can, as they so to speak. And everybody listening to this, hopefully later on you'll be tuning in to watch the Maple Leafs play against the Ottawa Senators. We'll be back next week with another edition to watch earlier in the week. We do have our own. Rick and I are coming into the 80s, so we now have our own Instagram account. Okay, so we've got Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan. Watch for us out there. If you're getting a little crazy notes from us about liking or friending us, it's because we don't know what the hell we're doing, and we're asking you guys to follow us. Just bear with us. Remember, we are old. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We will be back next week with another guest. Follow us on all the sites that you know us on, an Ultimate Leafs Fan or Rick Vibe, and Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan on Twitter and Instagram. And watch for some of our postings as the week goes on. Everybody have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.